the drama of the conclave that hasn't even started yet, even though it has started, sort of, continues. And I say sort of, the Cardinals had a meeting in Rome yesterday where something like less than half of them actually were able to arrive. It was a logistics planning meeting, and less than half of them have shown up already. Most of the rest will come soon. And I say most because here we're going to just start with some, we'll say bad news. For those of you who are counting votes already, Catholic Sat reports this, and their reporting is usually on the money. Two cardinal electors, Vinco Cardinal Pujic and Antonio Cardinal Canizares Llovera, both seen as arch-conservatives, had said that due to health concerns, they will not take part in the upcoming conclave, bringing the number of cardinal electors down to 133. These are seen as arch-conservatives. Now, I always try to wrap my head around what they mean by arch-conservatives, because I'm thinking that they mean that. I typically think of this in the post-conciliar way of understanding these things, which means that they'd been at best moderates before Vatican II. But when you're counting heads and you're hoping for a better pope, you're wanting every single one of the better ones to show up and do their duty. And those two are not, because they say they have health concerns. I'm not going to read in too much to what those health concerns are. I suggest others don't do that either. It's just worth noting, we've already got a couple cardinals who are not going to be there. And I'm going to just show you something here. We'll call this anecdotal, but the source is really good. This is Hillary White, who, as far as I've heard, lives in Rome and is one of the more veteran voices on these sorts of issues, the church and crisis issues. She usually comments on like cultural literature and art and those kinds of things, but she has very strong opinions about the state of the church. And she knows quite a few people in the Roman Curia. She posted this on X. I happened to be at a party on Monday populated by some of the best informed, most experienced Vatican watchers, people who've lived in Rome and been deeply involved for many years. The consensus was that we should enjoy the respite while we can. The next one will be much worse. Again, take that with maybe a grain of salt, anecdotal things. But that's what's coming. Now, on the flip side of that, I couldn't find the pictures. I wish I'd saved them from yesterday when I saw them. But Cardinal Farrell, the Camerlengo, child of Ted McCarrick, his former roommate, honestly, I mean, literally his former roommate, that's a whole rabbit hole to go down. He's the Camerlengo. He's the running Vatican City and basically running Vatican City and the church while Francis is not there. Not nowhere near the authority of a pope, but he is essentially the authority in Rome at the moment. He pulled out of his closet and dusted off his extravagant, some would call extravagant, I would call ecclesiastically appropriate clericals for offering masses and things. Others have done so too. Suddenly, Roman secretaries are seen wearing cassocks and things not seen among Vatican officials with posts in the Roman Curia in about, 12 years. Amazing how that works. Some report that there is definitely a feeling in the atmosphere there of change coming. So I'm going to just give you an anecdotal evidence to tell you to brace for even worse without giving you the other side of the story. And those who are on the ground there say there is definitely an appetite for change in the air. And change from what? Well, I have no evidence that Pope Francis was himself a stonecutter, as we have to use the language here on this platform for silly reasons, but we do. I have no evidence he was formally a member, but I have read the permanent instruction of the Alta Vendita, a document written by Italian stonecutter groups in the 1880s or something, and it was discovered by a convert from that way to Catholicism who got it into the hands of Pope Leo XIII. I believe it was Leo XIII. He and Pius X would pay out of their own family fortunes to have the thing translated into 5 languages, including English, and transmitted around the world. The permanent instruction of the Alta Vendita was essentially the internal bragging of the stonecutter groups that their way of taking down the Catholic Church was not to have a pope who was a member of them, but a pope who was spiritually a member, meaning he agreed with all their ideas and implemented them, and that he would then lead the church into being de facto members of their organization. Because people through obedience, blind obedience to Rome, would follow their evil ideas. That fits Francis to a T. And I'm not convinced we're not going to get somebody different than him in the aftermath. And we had this story, and I cannot report this because it's perfect. The WM Review posted this. Careful here. Headline: Italian stonecuttery mourns Francis, a kindred spirit. And they say, we're not in the habit of reproducing their press releases, but this obituary of Francis is a special case. And because they pretty much have to reproduce it. This is the actual here text. We will accept a clunky English translation for this. This is actually from their official website of the big house in Italy. This is posted late on the day on the 22nd of April. Get ready for this. You have never. This is blatant, but not the first time they've done this either. So here it is. Francis, the Pope of the last, according to the stonecutters of Italy. The big house of Italy of the ancient free accepted stonecutters joins in the universal mourning for the passing of Pope Francis, a pastor who, with his teaching and his life, embodied the values of brotherhood, humility, and a search for planetary humanism. Coming from the end of the world, now there's an interesting turn of phrase, Jorge Mario Bergoglio was able to change the church, bringing the revolutionary teaching of St. Francis of Assisi back to the present of history. In this moment of mourning, our communion intends to pay homage to the vision of Pope Francis, whose work is categorized by a profound resonance with the principles of stonecuttery, the centrality of the person, respect for the dignity of each individual, the construction of a supportive community, the pursuit of the common good. His encyclical Fratelli Tutti represents a manifesto. Freedom, equality, and brotherhood is the triple value asset of us. Overcoming divisions, ideologies, single thought to recognize the richness of differences and build a humanity united in diversity. This is what Francis ardently wanted. The same plan is pursued by the big house of Italy. Pope Francis has been able to combine faith and reason, complementary dimensions of human experience, renewing the Anselmian principle of credo ut intelligam. Saint Anselm is who they are invoking here. Remember that the devil will cite scripture. Always remember that, our Lord's warning on that. A faith capable of questioning and welcoming doubt and dialogue, which we also find in our initiatory method, founded on a path free from dogmas, substantiated by the incessant search for the truth. The pontificate of Francis has placed the last at the center, together with care of the planet and an ethic of development based on human dignity. This too can be found in stonecutter construction of the inner temple, based on tolerance, solidarity, and resistance against hatred and ignorance, and finds a profound correspondence in the pastoral work of Bergoglio, who, with his gentle revolution, has shown that humility, sorry, I can always laugh whenever I see that word associated with him, and dialogue are instruments of authentic strength. In the wake of the Francesco economy and the vision of a common home, the stonecuttery supports the commitment to a sustainable, fair, and supportive future. In this time of grave criticality, the big house of Italy finds itself in the appeal of Pope Francis for a planetary conscience, which recognizes humanity as a community of destiny. We honor this memory by continuing to work for an ethic of limits, for the respect of others, and for the construction of a temple founded on solidarity, freedom of thought, and universal brotherhood, signed by their main diabolist there, Luciano Romali. The construction of a temple founded on solidarity, freedom of thought, and universal brotherhood. Right there are the values of synodality. And they are shamelessly saying that Francis was the embodiment of that. Now, I know many of you will say, well, so what? This is, these guys will always try to cause chaos. And that's true. Always take anything they say that sounds pro-Catholic with a grain of salt for a whole lot of reasons, including the fact that much of the language you hear there was used in Catholic social teaching going back more than a century. But that's not a coincidence either, because the popes at that time were responding to that organization and trying to essentially counter them. No idea that gets wide traction is 100% in error. None. You cannot sell people on complete nonsense, at least not anybody, no thinking individual. You could always sell heinous evil ideas by wrapping them in some kind of truth. You go throughout history, you look at most of the evil movements in history, You'll find some element of truth there that gets exploited and twisted beyond recognition, but it's always that truth that's the anchor point. Now, the stonecutters have been praising him since the beginning, and I say literally the beginning. Tradition in Action posted this from 2013. Argentine stonecuttery salutes Pope Francis. More documents show that different stonecutteries praising and supporting Pope Francis are coming to public knowledge. Recently, the official salute of Argentine stonecuttery became accessible on the internet. After praising Bergoglio, the top taco of the House of Argentina expresses its pride for having a co-patriot elected pope. His letter was documented on the websites of both their Actuality magazine and Impulse Pares, which got the scoop. Photocopies of both web pages are found below. The photos are preceded by a translation of the Spanish in blue. Not that important. They got it documented. I will have links in the show notes at returntotradition.org if you are that curious about it, so you can read this stuff for yourself. Point is, it's easy to demonstrate that they've been singing his praises since 2013. I covered, I think, last year, some statement from, I think, that same Argentinian group or the Italian group singing his praises. You should have seen what happened when he released the document for Telly Tutti, Pan-Amazon Synod. Go back to 2019, the before times, as we sometimes jokingly call it now. 2019, we remember the Pachamama debacle. That happened at the beginning of the Pan-Amazon Synod. After the Pan-Amazon Synod, a document called Fratelli Tutti was released, and they actually used the words liberty, equality, and fraternity. That's the rallying cry of the stonecutters. It's also the rallying cry of the French Revolution. And it was in a Catholic document in a positive way, as if this was something a Catholic value would have. And it was never a Catholic value. And they praised him for it afterwards. Universal human fraternity is another one of their big calling signs. They have praised him for this. So don't be surprised. It's probably not the last time you're going to hear them singing his praises, especially if you actually get a decent pope next. They'll probably start issuing documents talking about how he needs to be more like his predecessor. Now, that makes the following believable. I don't like reporting on things from bad sources, what I consider to be untrustworthy bad sources, because I've seen a lot of bad reporting on this, or people just repeating what you're about to hear uncritically. But it's become such a pernicious rumor in the last 12 hours that I pretty much have to. There's an unfortunate rumor going around, and the only reason I'm addressing this is because I've gotten a lot of messages asking me to talk about this. There's a rumor from a very dubious source claiming that Francis rejected the sacraments in his dying moments. Now, this contradicts reports from the hospital during his convalescence, when at that time we were told repeatedly that during his more extreme health scares while in hospital, he had received the anointing of the sick and viaticum, meaning he had released the post-conciliar variation on the last rites. I would be remiss on this if I didn't report this at least a little bit. So take this with a heaping tablespoon of salt. I don't take this at face value, please. I'm begging you. Headline from lacrundeago.net. Bergoglio's rejection of the sacraments in the conclave. Is this the end of the false church prophesied by Padre Pio? Not interested in the Padre Pio alleged prophecy, because a lot of prophecies have been attributed to him, and some of them are very dubious. Some of them while he was alive, and he rejected those being connected to him while he was very much alive. We're going to go down here, though. It's a picture of Cardinal Pietro Parolin, and we're going to talk about something else, how he's in the news lately. There are pictures now online of this morning. There being long, long lines to pay respects to him, as you would expect. Here's this dubious story. Quote, obviously, they are not reporting the fact that perhaps by itself demolishes in one fell swoop the image of the Pope of the last that the media are trying to sew onto Bergoglio. According to Vatican sources, in the last hours of his earthly life, Francis even refused the sacraments, even going so far as to deny the major penitentiary access to his room. A refusal that Francis would have also opposed during his hospitalization at Gemelli Polyclinic when the Pope was already in serious health conditions. Pause there. This is contradicted by every single reporting on those actual health scares he had while in convalescence in the hospital. Contradicted by official reports repeatedly. Somebody's not being truthful here. Either the source for this article isn't, or the hospital officials. I will let you decide on this one. Such was the hatred against God that dwelt in the heart of this man that he even went so far as to commit the most blasphemous of acts. But nothing can disturb the flow of lies of the media narrative that in these hours does not seem to be telling the story of the death of the pontiff of the Holy Roman Church, but rather those of a pop icon, seasoned with a whole series of anecdotes about his passion for football and empanadas made by people who are confused. It is true that we did not get to the point in a day. And then he goes on to talk about Vatican II. And I'm generally going to be in agreement with them about Vatican II and things. I've never hidden my questioning about that. And when people ask about who do you think should be Pope, I'm like a cardinal who's willing to admit that there's problems with Vatican II. And there's no cardinal who's willing to publicly admit that. Not a single one. It's only one bishop who is, and that's Bishop Schneider. And he's probably not going to be made Pope, at least not this time around. I don't take that rumor about him too seriously unless you get a better source for it. And not in a better source, it can't be just somebody repeating that report. There has to be better sources for that. So take it with a grain of salt, and I'm only addressing it because people demanded that I do. There were sources like this. I'll remind you, 2 years ago, you may remember seeing Catholic commentators suddenly saying, I kind of danced around it a little bit, but I didn't give it any credence at the time, that there was going to be a rumor, that there was going to be an announcement that Francis was going to appoint a coadjutor bishop or a coadjutor pope. If you don't know what that is, a coadjutor bishop is when you have a bishop who is really ill or nearing retirement age. He is given an assistant bishop who's not an auxiliary bishop. He is given a bishop who will take over as the ordinary of the diocese when the see becomes vacant at his retirement, his resignation, or his passing away. This has been done with the papacy before, but not in like 1,000 years, not during some of the most corrupt periods in the papacy. And it was done away with because all the bishops and all the cardinals hated the practice. There were some rumors that Francis was going to do the same. They turned out to be nonsense. It didn't happen. Thanks be to God, by the way, because the names that were associated with this were horrible. Speaking of horrible names, got to say the word horrible with an asterisk because I don't even know anymore what the truth is about this story. Remember Cardinal Becciu? He was the one who, after Cardinal Pell, took over investigating Vatican finances, and the official Rome story, the official Bergoglian story, was that Cardinal Becciu was taking money from the church's purses for his own uses. He was engaging in corrupt practices. That might be true. He has vociferously denied this the entire time. You can make the case very easily that he was the fall guy for a lot of the financial misdeeds going on in Rome. He was, even after he was like formally charged with this stuff, Francis let him take part in a consistory where all the cardinals came, and he gave him a front row seat. Very strange stuff. He insists on taking part in the conclave. Headline from The Pillar: Convicted Cardinal Becciu claims conclave voting rights. Vatican said no. The Pope has recognized my cardinal prerogatives as intact, Cardinal Becciu said from Rome. You are about to have some serious drama unfold, probably all behind the scenes, unfortunately. But if he gets barred entry into the conclave, that will make the news. So pay attention to this. One of his big complaints was that I believe he filed lawsuits against some Catholic media outlets saying that they destroyed his reputation and made it so he can never even have a chance to become Pope. Man has serious, serious ambitions. And this is going to be one of those things that could play out very publicly, because if he tries to enter the chambers for where the conclave is taking place, which are under heavy guard, and they deny him access, that will absolutely make the news. Maybe he's being denied on a valid basis, or maybe he's the fall guy. Let's go back in time on this financial situation. During the reign of Benedict XVI, a man you might know, Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano, was tasked with Benedict XVI to investigate the Vatican finances. And he found millions upon millions of euros in places they should not be. He found a lot of accounting errors in very questionable places. He started finding money, and lots of it. And so he started restoring funding, putting money back to where it should go. He made a lot of enemies, to the point where, for his own protection, as Archbishop Vigano tells it, he was made the nuncio to the United States. And therein the story continues, as you know what happened with him. He was followed by Cardinal Pell, appointed by Pope Francis to do the same thing, investigate this money. And he started finding money in places it shouldn't be, and accounts that, like unmarked accounts, very weird things. He started balancing books and all sorts of things, rooting out corruption. And one day, for whatever reason, he had to go back to Australia for something. And he arrived, and while he was literally en route, money was wired mysteriously from the Vatican to Australia, and he was accused there shortly thereafter of heinous McCarrick type things that if you read the details of, and if you know anything at all about the dynamics of a publicly offered mass by a cardinal archbishop, you know it was physically, literally impossible for him to do the things that they accused him of. That didn't matter to the authorities, who in Australia are virulently anti-Catholic, and they railroaded him all the way until I believe it was their national Supreme Court had to overturn his conviction because it was so on its face nonsensical. And then he eventually returned to Rome and made the bad decision of getting surgery in an Italian hospital, which I hear is not a good idea. And he passed away. And so they appointed Cardinal Becciu to do this, and he became the fall guy from the looks of it. Whether he was a fall guy because he was a willing participant or not, I don't know. But his name has been dragged through the mud in this, and he is very, very upset, and I think in a justifiable way. He's insisting on going to the conclave. So here's what he has to say. He says, convicted Cardinal Angelo Becciu told Sardinian reporters Tuesday that he's permitted to attend the conclave that will elect Pope Francis' successor, and that a Vatican list designating him as a non-elector has no legal value. The Pope has recognized my cardinal prerogatives as intact since there was no explicit will to exclude me from the conclave, nor a request for my explicit renunciation in writing, Becciu told La Union Sarda newspaper April 22nd, despite his 2020 resignation of the rights and privileges of a cardinal. The Pope's April 21st death is a great sorrow, Becciu said, in light of a relationship that was always frank, sincere, marked by the utmost respect, even in the face of natural human differences of opinion. The Pope accepted my opinions, and together we shared all the choices, even the most painful ones. Sorry, I forgot to bring that up the screen. I thought I did. You can read between the lines of what he said there. He has always kind of hinted at that Francis knew that Francis was in on whatever was going on financially. He's always hinted at that, and you see it there again. Now, again, conclave is the big news at the moment. For obvious reasons, it's the big news even in the secular media. I saw a video this morning of Lionel Richie, the 70s and 80s pop singer, being asked about Pope Francis and the conclave, because I guess we're asking non-Catholic celebrities about existential metaphysical questions of the day. Now, the conclave is such a big story, and it comes now, unfortunately, with a hazard for Catholics, a big, big hazard, among others. The betting markets have started chiming in on who's going to become the next pope. We're going to go over that. I'm going to give you a hint here. You are not allowed as a Catholic to bet on the outcome of a papal conclave. It incurs an automatic excommunication if you do. That is an ancient law, and it's been re-upped every time the Code of Canon Law gets a major revision. And we'll go over that in a second. But first we go here to sportsbookreview.com. Yeah, I know. I never thought I'd be citing this website. Never even heard of it until now. But headline, new Pope betting odds. Pietro Parolin leads favorites and AI prediction for 267th Pope. Now, during the presidential election, these things were pretty good. These betting markets were a good way of showing what the Democratic impulse was and the feelings the Democratic winds were, little d Democratic, towards the outcome of the coming presidential election. And I hope the way I phrase that shows you the folly of this. Nobody except the three persons of the Holy Trinity know who is going to be Pope. No one else does. And this is why I refrain from every day uploading a video or doing a live stream on, this person could be the next Pope, and here's why. This person could be the Pope, and the next, here's why, because all it does is make people really either hopeful or really afraid, and there's no reason to do that. Here's what we have here from this unfortunate story. And I have this magnified. Let's make it so you can see it. Brief article. The Catholic Church will soon begin its process for choosing the next Pope, and Cardinal Pietro Parolin at plus 150 is the early betting favorite by the Vegas new Pope odds. Pope Francis passed away Monday morning at the age of 88 following hospitalization more than a month ago due to double pneumonia. He was the 266th Pope for 12 years. Conclave is expected to be held about 15 to 20 days following Francis's death, when the Roman Catholic cardinals from around the globe will determine the next Pope-elect. And here are who they think has the best chances. The higher the number, the worse they're doing. Parolin is leading, followed by Tagle and Turkson. 3 men you absolutely do not want to be Pope. Followed by Matteo Zuppi, same, don't want to be Pope. Followed by Cardinal Sarah, and then Pizzaballa and Erdo and Gambetti and Farrell, the camera let go. I laughed because he went on camera back in 2018 and said, I was shocked about the allegations of my former roommate, Ted McCarrick. I would have never thought that the man I lived with would do such evil things, that I would have been in the same building as him when it happened repeatedly. He didn't say it quite that way, but come on. It was the kind of statement made everybody think that everybody thought he was dumb. Cardinal Marx. Oh boy, Aveline, another what, Gresh. Basungo, don't put your hope in the African bishops. Yes, they're very good on the James Martin sin, but they've also asked the church to change its teaching on the idea that a man can have multiple wives. Okay, so they just traded one sin that cries out to heaven for justice for another one. But then you have Angelo Scola, Cardinal Burke is far down the list. Nichols is there. I mean, you look at this. These are the betting odds, right? And I, again, take the betting odds with a very serious grain of salt, because these are just typical people, many of them not Catholics, who are placing these bets, again, illicitly. This is a Japanese, I believe, betting odds X account. And they go over all of it. But here's the current part. They say the current support on prediction market, Poly Market, which is like the biggest one, is as follows. First place, Pietro Parolin, 29%. Luis Antonio Tagle, 22%. And third place, Matteo Zuppi at 13%. Modern elections are unique. They allow us to see the real expectations of the market. Let's go way to describe it. The real expectations of the market. And now the problem is, this is a metric that they're using. They're using a metric essentially of what would happen if people voted for it. And that's not how this works. This is the College of Cardinals meeting behind closed doors. And we know the kinds of things they tend to discuss in the broader sense. The context of the situation of the church and the world being one of them. Geopolitics always comes up at a conclave. So I expect a lot of geopolitical things. That war in Eastern Europe, the situation in the Holy Land, and yes, the U.S. government suddenly turning off the financial support of the U.S. bishops to be pretty big deals at this coming conclave. That doesn't tell you who's going to win. Francis has appointed like 80% of the cardinals. That can give you a good idea who's likely to win, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee it either. And so here's from a Las Vegas betting account on X. So it turns out you can actually bet on the next pope on a site called Kalshi. It's a CFTC regulated prediction market platform that is legal in all 50 states. Current pope odds, this is from a competitor to Polymarket. Pietro Parolin, 29%, Tagle, 22%, Zuppi, 11%, Turkson, 9%, Pizzaballa, 8%, Erdo, 8%, Umbongo, 4%, and Sarah, 4%. This is the same company that legalized betting on the election in America and has thousands of markets related to current events and sports. And I'm going to just beg you, for the sake of your soul, having this information is one thing. Placing a bet on who's going to be pope is a canonical crime. It incurs automatic excommunication. Don't do it. Canonlawblog.wordpress posted in 2013, okay, when their conclave was coming. Headline, betting on the conclave. According to the Old Catholic Encyclopedia in his Bullum Cogit Nos, which maybe I should record that if I can find it. They have a link. They don't have a link there, but if I can find that text, I will put it up as a Saturday educational video for you. It says, Pope Gregory XIV forbade, under pain of excommunication, all bets concerning the election of a pope, the duration of a pontificate, or the creation of new cardinals. Some folks are asking, is this still the law? Answer is no. Gregory's norm was a penal provision of an older system of canon law known as the Justicitalium. As such, according to Canon 6.5 of the Pro-Benedictine Code of Canon Law, Cogit would have been abrogated on May 19, 1918. There's presently no canon law. Conclave wagers, they say. Catholics should, of course, be mindful of the balanced view of gambling shown by the Catechism of the Catholic Church and avoid conduct contrary to it. And I will tell you right now, he's actually wrong. Because this has been repeated. I've seen priests out there warning you that you will lose your soul if you vote on this. So don't do it. This is one of those things that you should never, ever play around with. This is not a good idea, but I will see if I can find the full text and give it to you in a Saturday video, because voting for or betting on the outcome of an election is already kind of weird anyway, but on a papal conclave, you're placing bets on whether the Holy Spirit is going to be listened to or not by the people participating. It's odd, and I would suggest you save your money instead. The Catechism takes kind of again, as that text says, a balanced view on gambling. Right, it's not exactly a sin for you to go play penny slots unless you've got a disordered attachment to it, or you're spending inordinate amount of money or whatever. But there's a line, and that's clearly on the other side of the line. So don't do it. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a context for what we're talking about today. Conclave is coming, and we've entered a period of kind of chaos. But it looks like on the upside, things are returning to a pre-Francis normal. You're seeing the more ornate vestments and cassocks returning to Rome. Reportedly, there's a palpable sense of relief in the Roman Curia. But as Hillary White said, most of the well-connected Vatican insiders are bracing for impact for this conclave, thinking you're going to get somebody worse. We shall see. I think the worst possible outcome for a conclave is not another terrible pope who would help at least wake people up to the state of the church. The worst possible outcome is a moderate pope who looks a little conservative, maybe gives you back your Latin Mass a little bit better than Traditionis Custodes does. Doesn't say overtly evil things, doesn't run around insulting the faithful. I think that would be worse, because a lot of people would go back to sleep. They'd stop paying attention. They would think everything is fine now. Meanwhile, a lot of really troubling cardinals would still be having positions of authority in Rome. You get maybe half-heart responses to the latest machinations from the German bishops. Liberation theology would continue to run amok in South America with pagan syncretism going on. And you'd still get weird statements from the CDF or the DDF or whatever, and all the other places too in Rome. But people would be like, well, we've got a good pope, he'll take care of it. And then he doesn't. Or it's a half-hearted response. That's the worst possible outcome of a conclave, I think. Not a worse one, not a worse pope, because people will wake up. Or the super-based ultra-trad pope, who I can't even begin to identify who that would be among the cardinals, because it's not Cardinal Sarah. Sarah's fair he's more conservative than he is moderate, but he's definitely not a traditionalist. If you actually read the things he's written about the liturgy, about the role of Vatican II, and these other things, he's very conservative. He was also Francis's. He was in the liturgy office. He served under Francis in the Roman Curia. He was sacked because he contradicted Francis a couple of times publicly, and you don't do that. Just pray instead. If you're worried about this conclave, and you should be, to a degree, turn that worry into motivation for prayer. Every single day, pray for the cardinals to listen to the will of God, to put aside their own ambitions and their own vision of what the church should be, and that they actually listen to the promptings of the Holy Ghost at the coming conclave. It's what they're supposed to do anyway. I haven't seen any evidence that that's been the case, that that's how they've done things in a century or something, because it's always like geopolitics this and geopolitics that. Perhaps, instead of trying to have a moderate approach to political concerns, the church isn't called to that. Maybe, just maybe, the church is supposed to be standing in opposition to the prince of this world. The prince of this world is not our Lord. The prince of this world is the devil. The church has always said that. Christ is king, but the world is in rebellion to God. Always remember that. Curious what you have to say about this. Please, again, do not, under any circumstances, go participate in voting on a Polymarket or anything for on the outcome of a conclave. That's a great way to lose your soul. And I'm curious though, what else you have to say. So let me know in the comments, please. Who was second when Francis was voted in? I believe it was Scola, if I remember correctly. He was talked about as being a Benedict XVII type, and it turned out to be full-throated Bergoglian himself. So we'll see. I'm curious though what you all have to say about this. Let me know in the comments, please. So like and subscribe. If you haven't, it certainly helps. Sharing this on social media helps too. Again, I don't tend to spend too much time speculating on who you think is going to be Pope. Most people will be wrong in their predictions. So I'm trying to refrain from it. As always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.